Welcome to the Hunting Illinois podcast. Today we're going to be talking about a kind of controversial topic that came up here in the office. I know I'm new to waterfowl hunting, so it's just something that I heard about over the wintertime, and I wanted to get clarification and talk to the guys in the office here, and it became a whole big discussion. So now we figured bring it to the podcast, and we'll kind of cover it for any new hunters that might be hearing about this. And it's the practice of like hunting over flooded grain fields and things were waterfowl. So we're going to get into that and kind of how that came about and why it might be in some regions of the country and not in other regions of the country, and kind of that whole discussion. But before that, we're going to talk about some program updates and some IDNR updates that are happening right now. So Dan has some of the updates, so let's start with that.
Yeah, so we'll first start off with a quick reminder. I know it's spring turkey season. It's right around the corner. We're all starting to get geared up for that. The days are getting longer. It's kind of hard to be thinking about fall and what you're going to be doing next fall. But the deer lottery application opens up here very shortly. So the first lottery opens on March 4th and concludes April 30th. Now, this first lottery is for Illinois residents only. And again, this is for that firearm or muzzleloader permit application. Now, we put together a pretty good video. I think, Jason, you kind of filmed it last year, where you went through how, not just how to apply and through that process, but also what data you can use to help. You know, if you just look at a map of DNR sites, where do you start, right? And so you kind of broke that down and used some different data and metrics on how you might pick a particular site to apply for. So we'll have a link to that video down in the description or show notes below. So definitely check that out if you're interested. But again, that first lottery application for deer, firearm, and muzzleloader opens March 4th and concludes April 30th. Highly recommend getting that application in before you forget.
Yeah, that's one you don't want to procrastinate on.
Yeah.
Yep.
One other quick kind of news press release that DNR issued that I thought was worth bringing up. If you're interested in maybe some summer employment or some part-time employment, IDNR is seeking summer instructors for their 2025 urban fishing program clinic. So these are clinics where you teach anybody how to fish. So it's a great opportunity. But also, if you're just looking to learn yourself, that's kind of one reason why we wanted to bring this up, is we get a lot of questions. Hey, there's a Learn to Hunt program. Is there a Learn to Fish program? This is a program that's kind of tailored in the same direction on getting you started in fishing if you have zero experience. So definitely check out the Illinois DNR Urban Fishing Program. Look at their available clinics if you're interested in working and becoming an instructor. Again, they are hiring quite a few part-time positions for those programs right now.
And that's around the state, too. It's not just like Chicago.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty much a statewide program.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Very cool.
Cool. All right. And then, Curtis, you got some program updates for us?
Yeah, well, like Dan mentioned, we're getting into the turkey time. So that means turkey workshops for us. So the whole month of March, we've got turkey workshops every weekend all around the state. Starting off this weekend, we'll be down at Crab Orchard National Wildlife Refuge. So going south first, where it's a little bit warmer, a little bit greener, feels a little bit more like turkey season there. But then we'll slowly start working our way up north. We're going to have them at Clinton Lake. We're going to have one at Pere Marquette in the St. Louis area. We're going to have one at St. Chris Lake over by Springfield. And then we're going to have a couple up north, one in the Rockford area, a new place that we're excited about. And then one back at our old stomping grounds, Moraine Hill. So turkey workshops all around the state in the month of March here in Illinois. These are all free, adults only, 18 and over. You can find these posted on our website, www.learntohuntil.com, or you can search for them on Eventbrite and find those workshops there. They're all free. And then after those are over, we're going to have some webinars. So if you're not able to make it out for an in-person workshop, we're going to have a few webinars that'll hopefully give you some tips and tricks to be more successful this turkey season. We're going to start it off with Turkey Hunting 101. Then we're going to have our Turkey Hunting 102 webinar, which dives a little bit more in depth into the calling, the decoys, all the tactics that you actually use when hunting. And then we're going to follow that up with a calling special. So for anybody that needs a little bit more work on turkey calling, wants to discuss some more scenarios, things you might do if things go not according to plan, we'll try to get into all of that into our third webinar, which is going to be turkey calling and question and answer special. So 3 different webinars to help people with turkey season, and then a smorgasbord of in-person workshops. And we're excited about them this year because we're trying a little different curricula with our turkey workshops, where we're going to do a little bit more hands-on in the field, practice with some scenarios. So I won't give away all the secrets just yet, but yeah, we're excited about the turkey workshops this spring. They should be fun. We think people will learn a lot and hopefully give them the tools they need to go out and make some adventures once their turkey tag opens up and season starts.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm really excited for it. I mean, it's just fun to also get back out and do workshops. That's what we love to do with this job. So it's great to have them on the docket. And we're starting this Saturday going down to Crab Orchard.
And especially with the weather starting to turn, it's asking to be outside. It's wonderful. Yeah, it's a good time of year. Time of year.
So, all right. So the topic today we're talking about kind of just, and generally speaking, it's just hunting over like a flooded cornfield for waterfowl. Now, Dan and Curtis are both from Missouri, grew up there, and I'm sure, have you guys ever hunted over a flooded cornfield?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my first exposure to waterfowl hunting. Now, I grew up in Missouri. I didn't do a lot of waterfowl hunting growing up. I went once as kind of an adolescent high schooler, but I really didn't start getting into waterfowl hunting until I was in college, and that was in Western Kentucky, which is a very, very similar to Illinois. It's very flat. It's very ag-dominated, ag-centric, but again, it is part of that Mississippi Flyway. So a lot of the private landowners in that area flood corn, and that was my first experience to waterfowl hunting. So my first probably dozen hunts for waterfowl were over flooded corn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and mine was a little different because I was almost entirely public land hunter, and waterfowl hunting was the one thing that I didn't do with my family. I kind of started that on my own, and I started hunting moist soil because I started in teal season, of course, and they don't flood corn in teal season for a myriad of different reasons. But then eventually I started hunting in big duck season, and it was over flooded corn, and I was kind of amazed because to me, I kind of grew up thinking that you needed all these things to be a successful duck hunter, right? And that's why it wasn't available to me, because I needed a boat. I needed a dog. I needed calls. I needed so many decoys that they barely even fit in my boat. I need all the newest decoy. I needed all this stuff. Like, I basically convinced myself of that. And then I remember being like a poor kid duck hunter, right? Like high school. And I had paper mache duck decoys. Right? Myself. I got them at a yard sale, right? I don't remember what I paid for them, but just a couple bucks. Cheapest decoys in the world, actually pulling them in a old army like canvas knapsack. When it got wet, it weighed about 350 pounds, I'm pretty sure, but that's what I carried my decoys in. I had waders from Walmart, which were made of rubber and gave me calluses in places I didn't even know I had. But anyway, I had all the worst equipment in the world, and I was getting limits of ducks, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I was coming out and I was watching the ducks, and they're coming into the corn. I'm like, I don't need a bunch of decoys. I can go out there with 3 decoys. And if I get hid, if I get still and learn that that's the most important thing, I'm going to get shots at ducks with no equipment. So I have a lot of good memories hunting in the flooded corn, and it was all public land. It wasn't until I went to college and I started working for basically private waterfowl hunters, helping them manage their own flooded fields, that I ever worked on any private land doing that. So to me, it was all public, but it was a very positive experience, I'd say. And obviously recruited me as a waterfowl hunter.
So I imagine at the time, not knowing any better, did you think of, again, ethical hunting is there's what's legal and then what you as a hunter deem to be an ethical thing to do. So within the law. So some people may pick and choose different ways of hunting based on that. At the time, did you ever think about the ethicalness of it, or at least the fairness of it, either to the bird or even to the rest of the country? Or as kids, you were just happy to get out and see some birds?
I'll kind of jump in first, and then I'll throw it over to you, Curtis. Mine, again, I didn't grow up waterfowl hunting. I met some really good friends at college. My roommate farmed a bunch of ground with his family, like 4,000 or 5,000 acres in Western Kentucky, and had several areas that they built levees around, flood corn. So for me, there wasn't even an ethical question. It was, hey, I get to go try duck hunting, and this is how it's done.
Right.
And so to me, I didn't even think that it was anything different than, going out and sitting in a deer stand. It's just, this is the way you hunt ducks. That was my first real exposure to it. So I didn't really even have any thought, I guess, about it, really.
I wouldn't have.
Yeah, it was just, hey, here's a cool opportunity.
Right.
Let's go hunt. And boom, ducks are coming in. Next thing you know, you got your limit and you're happy as a clam.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, didn't really give it a ton of personal thought, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would mirror that and say kind of the same thing. My ethical thoughts were on ethical shot selection, right? Because I was using steel shot. I wasn't used to using steel shot, and you can tell very quickly that steel shot it functions differently than lead shot, right? So my biggest ethical concerns are on making sure that I'm taking very ethical shots, shooting ducks when they're in range, because I did not want to be a skybuster. I heard everybody talking bad about skybusters, and I did not want to be that. So that was where all of my opinions were. And I guess because I was hunting on public land, I never even thought about that, because I'm like, this is public land. You know, maybe I would have been more inclined to think that if I would have started on private land, because I would have been like, are you sure this is legal? But like, it was public land, and so it wasn't just me, it was everybody. Everywhere I looked, people were getting ducks, and so everybody was happy. And so to me, I guess, where's the victim, where's the crime, right? I guess maybe the ducks would say otherwise, but hey, at the same time, they're pouring in there to eat this corn. So I never thought of it as being unethical, as being like too much food. But at the same time, I would never, we grew up deer hunting, and I would never, ever even think of going out and dropping corn every year. But at the same time, if a farmer left a field standing because they turned it in for insurance, would I still hunt that field for deer? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the difference?
Yep. And then without thinking more into it, I mean, me personally, if I grew up in that area and that was an opportunity I had for myself, I think I would have, the ethical standard would have been, am I staying within the limits of whatever the daily limit is for each species that you got? And then is it legal? And then after that, as long as I would trust the state and the biologists to be tracking the quotas and be like, if we're harvesting what they think is the surplus of the population and we're not depleting it, then what's the big deal?
Sure.
So that's where I would have been at if I was a high school kid.
And that's very much where my head was, similar to Curtis. Now, I wasn't at the time thinking too much about shot selection. I was really focused on trying to ID ducks. I was in college. I was in ornithology at that point. I didn't have a ton of exposure to birding and to waterfowl growing up, so a lot of that was brand new to me. And so my first couple hunts out there, it was very much, my mind was so fixated on trying to identify every single, okay, can I shoot that? Can I shoot that? The ethics of hunting over flooded corn never even occurred to me. And nor do I think it would at this moment either.
No, I agree with Jason too. Like, I feel like I would be a very, like, sort of assume like the waterfowl have to eat anyway. Like, they're going to be, you know what I mean, in different fields, they're going to be around. You're not going to kill all of them. So it's like, ultimately, they're still going to kind of have a net gain, I guess, out of the whole deal. So, because it's like Jason, I'm from the East Coast. So, like,
sure. Yeah.
I didn't do any waterfowl hunting till September of last year. So
then what's the point of view of people? Well, before we get into that, first off, what parts of the country is this a common practice so that we understand the landscape first? And then what is the point of view of folks who are against this practice?
And I would say on private land, people flood food everywhere. Okay, corn and rice, depending on where you are in the country, those are the top two in terms of number of days that ducks can feed in a field. Corn and rice outperform all other crops, head and shoulders. But rice is a little above corn, but obviously it's limited in where you can grow that. So depending on where you are on private, most people are growing either rice or corn, and then probably supplementing millet or some other moist soil type crops in there to fill in the gaps. But as far as public land, as far as I know, no state does it to the extent of Missouri. I've never seen a state do it to the extent of Missouri. I'm sure there are lots of states that do flood corn a little bit for waterfowl, but I've never seen it to the extent of Missouri anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. And to be clear, like, this is corn that's solely being flooded for waterfowl. It's not used for anything else. Like, this is a stand of corn that was planted and then flooded because this is going to be a waterfowl spot.
Yeah, for basically wildlife habitat. So waterfowl hunting's the primary goal, but yeah, whatever else get out of that for other wildlife habitat too. Yeah,
I think it's kind of like a food plot for deer.
It's like a food plot for deer. Yep.
Yeah, not even considered to be harvested in most of these. Maybe they'll harvest a certain percentage of it, but definitely not all of it. Definitely they want to leave a lot of food for the ducks. And yeah, the whole purpose is in Missouri, at least on the public land, it's to have good hunting And me as a waterfowl hunter, again, I was like, hey, where's the crime? But I understand some of these southern duck hunters, they've slowly seen their skies empty of ducks. And so they're kind of in the opposite end of the spectrum where they're looking for somebody to blame. And well, it's pretty easy to blame the people up there sitting in the flooded corns with full straps of ducks, right? So that's where we are right now. There's been so many, whether you're counting public or private land, there's been a lot of public places, big refuges, really nice places built all up and down the flyway. There's also been a ton of private individuals that have bought up small and big farms, creating duck clubs or personal duck properties. They exist all up and down the flyway. So with all this great food, including, I might add, things like ice eaters. So even when the ice is you think the marsh is frozen, nope, not that marsh, because they got ice eaters in the corn, so it's still open. Why would the ducks leave? Why would they continue an arduous journey south when they don't have to? Now, some ducks like blue-winged teal, widgeon, they're gone.
Way early.
But the ducks like mallards that can hang out up north and eat corn and maybe just even sit on the ice, not even need open water, hey, they're not moving like they used to. And who are you going to blame? Your hunting's not as good as it was when you're a kid, and that's a bummer. So what's the answer? I don't know.
And that's the overall challenge of just managing a migratory species like this too. That was one thing when I first started hunting waterfowl. I knew in the back of my mind, hey, this is a migratory bird, but I didn't really put that into context in terms of hunting strategy, hunting pressure, stuff like this, and how weather can impact what the states down south are seeing, what some of the management practices up north are doing impacts what the southern states are seeing. And just this whole conversation, I think, really sets the stage of the importance of managing a migratory species and having buy-in from all these different entities rather than just one state making a decision and that state impacting everything else. So I know, Curtis, you found some interesting literature from when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service kind of clarified this, because there was, and we get a lot of questions about it too at workshops. And, the way that baiting is kind of, let's say, regulated for the most part is what's defined as a standard agricultural practice. So if you go plant corn, that corn is harvested or that corn is left standing, you can hunt over it. Now, what you can't do is take a bag of corn and dump it out there, because that's not a standard agricultural practice. But this is where we kind of get into this interesting area where, is flooding corn really a standard ag practice? So, Curtis, I know you kind of pulled up some references there. Could you kind of walk us through that process a little bit?
Yeah, well, first, just a little bit of history. The baiting regulations, as it applies to waterfowl, these originated in the 1930s. So at that time, we're basically, if everybody remembers, this is when we're really entering the age of conservation. So we're kind of getting out of this age of extermination where we basically felt like natural resources had no limit. We could kill all we want and, hey, there's no repercussions. We were just kind of getting into this age of conservation. And so baiting laws, when they first came out, were pretty controversial, right? Because people were thinking like, hey, if I want to go out and just dump corn all over the place and hunt ducks and geese, why shouldn't I be able to do that? Because just a few years ago, I could float out there with my punt gun in the spring and shoot hundreds of them, and so that was hard for some people to understand. So when these things originated, it was out of all of these big conservationists, Ding Darling, I know, one of Dan's favorites. He was big time in all of this, and he's got a couple great quotes back there in that time. Maybe I'll pull up here in a second, but basically the laws were written almost as they are today, whereas people can flood corn. But basically, if you're not going to attempt to agriculturally collect your grain, so if you're not going to try to combine it at all, you cannot manipulate it at all. So this is where it differs a little bit for waterfowl as opposed to doves. It's a little bit more restrictive for waterfowl. You cannot manipulate it at all. So if you're going to leave that corn all standing, you can't go out there and mow it down, or you can't go out there and do any type of manipulation. The only type of manipulation that is allowed, and it's written right into the law, is flooding it. So it does say that flooding, whether you harvest them or not, you can hunt there. So the difference is if you do harvest it, so if the farmer takes it out like normal, common agricultural practices, then you can manipulate that, what's left. So if you want to mow down the stubble, to make it smaller, you can do it at that point as long as it was taken down normal agricultural practices. So a little bit convoluted in all that, but basically what it means is like, yeah, you can have cornfields that you just flood for ducks, or you can have cornfields that you plant and you harvest and then you flood for ducks, but you cannot manipulate any grain that you leave unharvested for the purpose of attracting wildlife or waterfowl specifically. So kind of complicated, but in a nutshell, that's what it is. And, a lot of the Southern folks, they look at the duck clubs, and basically this turns into a kind of a class warfare type thing, right? Because it's like, who has the money to flood corn? Well, it's the more richer people. And who doesn't have money to flood corn? Well, it's the more poor people, right? So they're turning it into a class, and maybe there is a certain aspect of that to it, but it also comes down to the point that just dumping out corn for any type of animal, that's not generally considered fair hunting practices in most states for most critters. So a little bit different. You will, if you search this, you will find some of the Southern folks who are trying to challenge it. And some of them say, hey, don't let anybody hunt over unharvested grain or flooded grain at all. And some of them are going the other way where they're saying, hey, why don't you just let us dump corn in the water or dump sunflowers in the water? Because what's the difference between a flooded cornfield or a flooded field that you dump 200 bushels per acre into it? And ultimately, I can't answer those questions of what the difference is. I do know one takes more work and more planning and, yes, more money. And one could be maybe tougher to regulate. I don't know. Or they could be worried that the corn or whatever bait is being used may not be as spread out as if it were planted. And there could be even higher contamination issues. I'm not sure exactly what the difference is, but that's the way it's been written since the 1930s. Now, they clarified a few things in the 90s, and you'll find some good articles by Ducks Unlimited kind of talking about these things, but really nothing changed. They just kind of clarified the points that you can hunt over flooded corn. They also clarified little aspects like, let's say you got a flooded cornfield and your hunter's walking in every day. Now they've knocked over some corn. So is that manipulated? Well, they've went ahead and clarified that in the 90s to say that that is not manipulated. Hunters that inadvertently knock down corn, walking to and from the blind, or retrieving ducks, that doesn't count as being manipulated. They also clarified a few small things like you can brush in your blind using things like corn stalks, but make sure that you don't have any corn kernels on there that might be distributed to the wildlife. And there's some little caveats in there, like if we were sitting in Missouri public land on flooded corn, if you sit there and pick kernels or you pick cobs off and you throw corn out there, guess what? Now you're baiting. Now you've baited. Now you can't legally hunt there until all that bait is gone for 10 days. So yeah, there's some caveats in here. There's some definite potential to where people can try to push the boundaries one way or another, but when done right, it equals good duck hunting. So me as a duck hunter that's been basically the benefactor of all this stuff, I'm decidingly for it because it's been good hunting for me and everybody around me. And because Missouri does expand this to public land, it's not that class warfare type thing because it is open to everybody.
Yeah, I was wondering, has this been a hot topic or controversial decision since it started? Or has the duck harvest down south changed over time? And have they seen those numbers change? And then what are they attributing it to? Is that a thing? Like what's happened since 1930, and is it because we have the internet now and people just have a voice to complain about it much more loudly?
And I want to
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much have their DNRs or state, Fish and Game, whatever you want to call it, invested in habitat as well, like in preserving habitat, and you know what I mean,
Mhm.
like.
And then the ag explosion of the 70s across the Midwest as well, going from the small family farm to large corporate farms that we've seen all over the place, providing more food for everything. This like, what do they know what the main driver is, Curtis? Like, what's changed and why are they complaining now?
Yeah, it's so impossible to tease out, right? Because all these things have been happening at the same time. So what is to blame? You don't know. All the people down south know is that they're not seeing the number of ducks that they did in their past, and the numbers do they do kind of back that up. They are getting fewer ducks, and the species composition is a little bit different in a lot of the southern tier states. That ducks might be arriving later. They might be staying not as long. They're anxious to move back north because of more available food sources. And I don't know exactly how the attitudes really changed over time. I know, like in the 30s, people were just angry that people were telling them what to do, right? Because they want to do whatever they could, at least the people who weren't interested in conservation. But I didn't really, because I lived in Missouri for when I was young, I never really heard people complain about it there, obviously, because it was open to everybody. It was in public land. You could draw it. Everybody had the same possibility of hunting the best spot in the whole state as anybody else. So it seemed very fair. I didn't hear a lot of people question it there. It really wasn't until, like you mentioned, all the social media, and it's because of this tale of two cities, because you've got all these Louisiana, Arkansas duck hunters, and they're filming TikToks of like dancing in their decoys because they don't got no ducks coming. And then they're looking at people from Nebraska that are like, yep, got the 20th limit of the year. Like, this has been the best season ever. And so that creates anger, right? It's the old sour grapes, which is a unfortunate weakness of us humans. We can't just be happy about ourselves. We got to be angry that other people have it good too. So
Yeah, it
I
seems
think
like
that,
rather than trying to fix it nearby, you know what I mean? Like, we're gonna blame afar, like see what we can do to improve
yeah,
it
let's
here.
make their duck hunting bad too. That'll teach them.
Yeah.
Is it just they don't have the cornfields down there? Like, this is not the same agricultural setup that we have in the Midwest. Is that why can they flood down there? If they could flood, do they flood? And is it just less corn down there? And I guess also the birds just ain't going that far as much anymore.
Yeah.
Rice is better than corn.
Or is it any kind of grain that can be flooded?
Yeah, any kind of grain. Rice
like,
is actually a little better than corn.
Sure.
And rice, they often flood to keep pests down. So they wouldn't be able to hunt over that if they were out. You know what I mean?
But basically, remember where the ducks are coming from, though, Jason. They're coming from the north.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like, let's imagine your house, right? And somebody built a awesome restaurant, like your favorite restaurant, and it was right next door. You would probably eat there a lot, much more often than if your favorite restaurant was like, 20 miles away, right? So that's a big part of it. I mean, yeah, like also it takes a much more harsh climate factor right now to push these ducks further south, because there is all these acres and acres of food and refuge. Because now, since basically the 1930s, organizations like Ducks Unlimited, Delta Waterfowl, also the National Wildlife Refuge System, they've been purchasing lands and also repurposing wetlands and making more and more habitat, which has been great for waterfowl as a whole. But it also makes it where the ones who aren't basically shallow water dependent, like teal and widgeon and stuff like that, they don't have to continue flying. I mean, migration is it expends a lot of energy. So if you're a duck that can fly half as far, maybe you're a little bit more cold, but you still got food. You've still got safety in numbers because all your other mallards are here. There's just not that incentive to go south that they used to. Even when we get years, it's like, oh, it's the coldest winter that we've had in 50 years. And a lot of the southern hunters are like, all right, it's going to be great. They still wind up getting disappointed because maybe they're only getting gadwall, because gadwall are pushed further south than the mallards or this or that. So It's a tough thing. It's a combination of probably a whole lot of different factors.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's, they can flood the corn, they can flood the rice down there. But if the ducks got a bunch of flooded corn and flooded rice further north that's closer to where they're going to be nesting anyway, then why extend their trip,
Is the overall waterfowl population better than what it was in 1930? Like, has it been, from what I understand, it's been increasing this whole time, right? Like, it's doing better than it's ever have.
Well, I wouldn't say the whole time. There's still there's peaks and flows.
Okay.
Yeah, much better shape now than in the 30s. Much better shape. I mean, some waterfowl, like the wood duck, for an example, is such an amazing conservation story. Like, it should be yelled from the mountaintops because, the flood of 93 and 95 especially almost really devastated wood ducks across the Midwest. And it was through really pointed conservation efforts through Ducks Unlimited, Delta Waterfowl, state agencies putting up wood duck boxes and protecting their habitat. And now it's the number one or number two duck harvested in most states, really healthy population. So for the most part, most duck populations really a lot better shape today than they were in the 1930s. And I wouldn't say progressively doing better or anything, but they've been in a really healthy spot for a long time. I think it was back in the 70s when we did the waterfowl point system, where you had to go out and each duck was worth a different point value. And so, for an example, like a one canvasback, and you were limited out for ducks.
Okay.
Or maybe you could shoot like a dozen ringnecks because they were only worth a few points. So the regulations and how we've harvested ducks has changed so much, but the population is in a good area. So much so that they're actually proposing some pretty radical things with pintail. It's pretty cool because northern pintail has one of the most expansive breeding ranges of all waterfowl. Okay, and I know this specifically because when I went up into northern Alaska, all the way up on the Arctic Ocean, the most plentiful duck up there was northern pintail. They were absolutely everywhere. They were nesting and they were very prolific. And when I looked in Sibley, guess what? They weren't even supposed to be there. So they're actually going to try to propose a higher limit for northern pintail over this next. It's up to the states whether or not they accept it, but it sounds like the feds are going to propose raising the pintail limit, I think, all the way up to 3 as a test to see what it does. Because northern pintails had a very restrictive limit for a long time now, either 1 or 2 in most parts of the country as the daily limit. And a lot of people are starting to think that maybe their count of pintail is wrong. Because you hear all these duck hunters are like, all I see is pintails. All I see is mallard and pintails, and I already had my one pintail. And I've been in that boat myself, that maybe their total count of pintails is wrong because they're only surveying basically the prairie pothole region. And instead, pintails are breeding all across Alaska and Canada and the prairie pothole region, and they're not all getting accounted for. And so it's kind of cool. They're going to basically double or triple the pintail limit for a small number of years and then see if that has any noticeable impact on the pintail population as a whole. My theory is that it does not. It has zero impact whatsoever, but we'll see what happens. It's kind of cool. I like it when they pull strings, to try to learn things. I like that.
That's cool. Do you know offhand, why pintails are more of the rarer duck? What's their life history that prevents them from being as popular as a mallard or something like that?
Like in terms of like hunter preference, you mean? Or
no. Like, why are they so limited in harvest? Like, do they struggle for some reason for mating or something like that? Like, is there something about their life history that makes, or do they have a certain habitat that got degraded more than another bird?
Yeah, I do have some vague recollection of this, but I'm not 100% certain, but I'm pretty sure this has to do with pintails have a little bit different breeding strategy than most other ducks, whereas they try to breed as early as possible. So they're often the very first nest on the landscape, and so also the first little ducklings born. And so they are potentially more susceptible to predation, especially in the prairie pothole region, which has a high percentage of nest predators. And then what happens if you're the very first nest that's out there? There's a good chance that you might be one of the ones that's predated. So I think that ties into it a little bit. They're maybe not quite as prolific as mallards and some of the other birds, but definitely a popular duck, one of the favorite ducks of most duck hunters. And so they've always got a lot of attention. And that's a contentious issue too. There's some people that are very, I guess, distraught that they're talking about raising the limit and worried about what it might do to the population on a nationwide scale. And then there's other people who are not worried about it at all and think that when it's over, the data will show that it was a non-issue. And maybe we could have made it 6 pintails a day and that still wouldn't have changed it. Who knows?
Sure.
But I like that they're changing things personally. So I'm interested to see how it turns out.
And then not to get derailed too far, but where's the prairie pottle region at for anyone who's never heard that region before? Where's that located?
Yeah, so centered in the Dakotas. So it goes up into Canada and, spreads out into Nebraska a little bit too and everything. But the bulk of it is in North and South Dakota.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think? Is this just the new normal for the South as of right now, as we have the ag on the landscape at this point that's grown so much and that the food seems to be the limiting factor? We've talked about how we were thinking maybe climate change might be doing something with it, but in reality, it doesn't matter if it's cold or warm. If the food's available and they're able to get to it with the ag that we have already built up between Canada and the Midwest in the central part of our country here, is this going to be like just a new normal for the South, or is there like management practices that they're going to be able to do to try to draw the birds south? But I don't know if they could have, if there's a really nice restaurant 30 miles away and it could be the nicest one, I never get to it and never see it. It doesn't matter what management you do if the birds ain't going that far anymore. They're never going to know about it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You could make the best possible. I mean, even if you were dumping bags of corn out in marshes in Louisiana and Arkansas, would the ducks come down? I don't know. I mean, if they were forced to, then sure. But I don't know. The one nice thing, and I know it's kind of a bummer because it's more expensive to do non-resident hunting. But the one nice thing about waterfowl hunting is it is much less expensive to do that as a non-resident than it is like deer hunting. So again, is it as good as duck hunting right in your own backyard? No, it's not. But the one nice thing is at least, hey, you can travel up to the Dakotas and you can do an early season duck hunt. You can travel up to Missouri. You can do duck hunts. You can do all that. Most states, it's just over about $100 to get all the credentials you need to duck hunt, which is not cheap, but it's not near as expensive as buying a $400 or $500 non-resident deer tag.
And the nice thing about a lot of the states that I've non-resident hunted in is they have, kind of like on the fishing side, right? You may have a 3 or a 5 day or even a 10-day non-resident fishing license. A lot of states also have that for on the hunting side, which is perfect for waterfowl. If you're taking a trip, that way you don't have to buy that entirety, non-resident license for the entire annual year, which may be, $95 or $100. Mm-hmm. You can buy that couple days while you're going to hunt there. That's a really nice development recently. Big fan of those.
Yep. It stinks though, man. It goes back to that class. I mean, it doesn't matter. Any more extra expense than what you need though is a bummer.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of the beast of having to hunt a migratory species that you can't guarantee is going to show up at your location. That's rough.
It is.
It's a hard problem. I feel bad for all the Southerners who this was a huge pastime for them. And it might be changing for them.
But it sounds like what Curtis says too, like maybe it's time for them to try pulling a couple of strings and changing a few things and seeing if that has any impact. I mean, worst that happens is it stays as it is. I mean, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah, and they've still got, obviously, the teal. They're still moving through. There are birds like widgeon that are still moving through. So it may not be the species diversity that they did have at one point, but what's the right answer, Because I don't feel like, personally, stopping flooding corn, to me, that's not the answer. I mean, if all of a sudden that happened where you could no longer, let's just say, flood corn at all, would the ducks make it down there even still? I don't know. I mean, because there's enough dry fields. I mean, I see a ton of ducks feeding in dry fields, and those are harvested by normal process. And we talked about this, I think, before we started recording, but I think average combines today, super efficient. So they generally leave about 2 to 3 bushels per acre in a cornfield is probably average. That's a lot more efficient than combines of the past. And they've done studies as far as how much food in a field makes a duck want to be there. And basically anything under about 1 bushel per acre, and the duck or goose is kind of like, this isn't worth it for me, I'm leaving this field. So you see there's kind of a narrow window there, but you think about all the farm ground there and you realize that's still a ton of food that's all over the place for these birds. And so to me, to sacrifice all the hunting up north by saying you can't flood corn, I mean, that's a harsh step. I'd rather just invite the people down south to come up and hunt in the flood corn, like, let's join resources. We'll go down there and we'll fish for redfish and maybe go frog hunting, and you come up here and we'll go duck hunting.
There you go. Hunter exchange program. You can go alligator hunt or whatever it is. That'd be cool.
That would be cool.
Okay, now to get a little selfish or a little bit more local, how does Illinois deal with flooding fields, and what's that look like for management around here? Is that a thing? Is it not a thing? Is it legal, not legal? What's it like in Illinois?
It's not near at the scale that you'll see in Missouri. There are quite a few private landowners who do it. One thing that I found interesting, I assumed when I first moved to Illinois that it would be very similar to the areas in Kentucky and in Missouri that I hunted, where it's a fairly flat landscape. I don't want to say it's cheap, because anytime you're doing dirt work in a large scale, it's going to cost a ton of money.
Yeah.
But I was like, it's a flat state. It's a farming community. It's a hunting community. I expected a lot more, to be honest, flooded corn than I saw in terms of, especially on private land side. Public land's a little bit different, but on private land, to me, it seemed very naturally conducive to be similar to Missouri or Kentucky. But we also have pretty darn good soil types in Illinois. Illinois is a corn and soybean mecca. We get a lot of bushels per acre. So I can also see on the flip side, every acre, that may be, a $200, $250 or 250 bushel acre field. Mm-hmm. It can be a little bit more expensive to convince a farmer, hey, levy this off. You're never going to harvest that again, and let's flood it. So there's a couple different reasons there, but it's definitely not at the scale that you see in Missouri.
Yeah, I could see the difference in financially just it being more efficient to harvest it. I mean, we see out here, next to our Walmart, we have a cornfield, it goes right up to the parking lot. I mean, they got an inch of ground, they're going to plant corn in it.
We have good soil.
Yeah. And then I got a buddy who is your most purebred farmer you're ever going to meet. And it's been a joy getting to know him, because I'm from Philadelphia, so I came out here 10 years ago. But talking to him and just seeing him almost shed a tear whenever he sees a new house being built in an old farm field. He's like, what are they doing? They're missing so much money.
It's just money. He just sees it going down the drain.
It's a different culture.
It is.
It's a completely different culture.
And certainly when you get over along the river, the Illinois River, the Mississippi, and get into those private duck clubs that are normally, fairly expensive membership driven, you're going to see a lot of carefully managed habitat there, whether it's moist soil units or whether it's flooded ag. But you're going to see a lot more of that the closer you get to those high dollar private clubs that, again, have the money to be able to do that management. That's not cheap.
No.
Just running a pump to, one of the properties we hunted, it would take about a month to fill up that pool from the well. Wow. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of water. It takes a lot of electricity. Costs money.
So with that in mind, why do you think our public lands don't have it? Do you think it's that, or the main thing is the financial?
I can't answer that. I'm not really sure. And it's also, there's some probably management decisions there too. Mm-hmm. I know we went out to Shelbyville.
Yep.
Was that last year?
It might have been 2 years ago.
I can't remember when it was.
I think it was last year.
Shelbyville Lake State Fish and Wildlife Area, and we hung out with the biologists. We were filming a couple videos with them, and they actually made a conscious effort to go from ag to a native moist soil unit.
Yep.
And they actually did see a pretty substantial increase in the harvest, basically the bird per hunter average. Mm-hmm. So they're quite happy with that decision. But again, that's a lot more management intensive. They have to go out there, spot check it. They're probably having to do some interseeding, where planting a cornfield's not too time consuming, not too expensive. So I think there's a lot of different things at play there. But yeah.
Shelbyville was amazing.
Shelbyville was great.
We got video of what I would call a duck tornado. All the birds came up. It was the springtime. It was after the season was over. And they were saying how their plantings, that food is actually better throughout the spring. So it provides, as just an ecological impact on waterfowl, it's a much better holder for them in the springtime. And it gives them a lot more food to have that might be on an after winter landscape that might not have as much food available to them.
Yep.
So,
and one thing you're very conscious about there too is utilizing the water to do a lot of the management for you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're flooding an area and you want, native vegetation to come up, you can hold that water on a little bit longer or draw it down earlier. And that can influence the vegetation that's going to come up and respond to that. Not to mention, you can also use it to kill invasive species. Like he mentioned, they do quite a bit out there, that if they have some invasive species that are really starting to take over their solar unit, they'll flood it back, leave water on it. It'll nuke all that stuff.
Just like doing a burn.
Exactly.
You're using water instead of doing a burn. You're able to use water and pumps and the levees they have.
So there's a lot of really cool wetland science that goes on. Yeah.
Yep. So that's really interesting. That's fun. And that's in our video. We went over like all the different projects that they're working down there. We're using the PR money. How they're managing that. So it's a cool little 10-minute video on our YouTube channel if you want to check that out. I'll link that in the description too, just so I can get some more eyes on that, because that was a good video we made. So check that out.
What do you think, Kurt?
Go back to the difference. So first off, I haven't seen any state that floods corn to the extent of Missouri. So I don't think there's really any other state that does it to the extent that they do. But it also comes down to how much wetlands do you have? Because like you mentioned, all in all, moist soil is way better bang for your buck. And so if you've only got a small amount of wetlands, it's probably moist soil all the way. Whereas now if you go into Missouri, they've got 14 or 16 waterfowl, focus areas. These things might be 5,000 to 7,000 acres. And so they're flooding hundreds of acres of moist soil. And then the flooded corn is additive. So it's not like they're only utilizing flooded corn. They're utilizing the moist soil and other wetland plants. Just the corn is the additive measure. And you have to have a lot of acres to be able to do that. That's the luxury of having, hey, I've got, 3,000 acres to flood. What all do I want to put in there? Whereas a lot of smaller public land sites are like, okay, well, we've got 17 acres to flood. What's the best bang for our buck there? It's most probably going to be moist soil,
Cool. Any other final comments on this topic, guys?
No, I think it's a really interesting topic, and I think it really gets down to the nuances of how wildlife is managed in this country. And I kind of hinted at it a little bit earlier, but I find this whole topic fascinating. Largely, I'm a big duck hunter. I personally don't feel smart enough. I don't feel like I have enough experience both on the North and the Midwest and in the South to really come to an overall conclusion on how I personally feel about this. I can see all the different sides and understand where they're coming from. And I just think it's really fascinating. And I think it's a really good test case for how migratory species can be managed. And I'm really curious to see what comes out of these flyway meetings in the next, couple of years, how much this conversation progresses. Because in reality, there's states trying things that if you would have asked me a decade ago, I would have never thought any state would have tried it in terms of hunter recruitment, in terms of waterfowl stuff. Like Nebraska.
Yeah.
Nebraska, for instance, they started this new process where when you go to buy your duck stamp stuff, you can either sign up as a tier 1 or a tier 2 hunter. Now, I can't recall the exact specifics of which one's tier 1, which one's tier 2.
Right.
But the way
one option too.
Exactly. Yeah. The way it essentially works is if you're, let's say, a tier 1 hunter, you have to follow that normal bag limit. You have to be able to identify all the species, make sure you're within, how many mallards you can harvest per day, how many of those can be hens, that type of thing. You can do the tier 2, which allows you to only harvest 3 ducks per day. But you don't have to be as reliant on your ID skills because it doesn't matter sex and it doesn't matter species. It just matters that it's a duck. And so there's some nuances there. But if you would ask me a decade ago, I would have said, no state's going to try that. No, ever. But they are trying things. And so
you were almost against it because you were afraid they're going to shoot.
I was adamantly against it when it first popped out.
But then you think about like the recruitment aspect of it and how.
And they tried it. And we saw data. The data supported that, hey, this isn't really having an impact. So it comes back to this whole concept of how wildlife is managed, additory and compensatory mortality. Additive is not what we're going for when we think about managing a hunting population. We're going for compensatory mortality. I viewed this change. I was like, oh, this is going to be additive. You're going to start removing way too many of a certain species. The data didn't support that. The data showed basically no trend. But what it did is it allowed more people to get out there and to reduce a huge constraint for a lot of people that is that ID component.
Yeah, number one thing with new hunters is they're terrified of breaking regulations.
I mean, I still am. Yeah. Like, it's always in the back of my mind.
It's good that you are. Yeah. That's the way to go. But that any type of leniency in that to open it up and still be fair and also stay in that
data-driven, exactly.
And the data-driven stuff,
And I just find it fascinating that all these states are now having this conversation. I'm really interested to see what this landscape looks like in the next 10 or 15 years and how things trend. Because I think Nebraska's on year 3 or 4 of doing this now. And I think they signed with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, I think it was like a 4 or 5 year pilot study. So we should be getting a full report coming out of Nebraska here soon to see how that impacts things. But again, the preliminary data looks great.
Yeah. And then it's good to remember for new hunters that might not know this, I believe waterfowl regulations in Illinois, the state regs get revised every 5 years. Right?
To some extent.
Or they can add it, or not, they can't revise all of it. They can only do certain things.
So the way it works is, again, these are migratory species.
Yeah.
And so the way it works is the regulations are laid out by a flyweight council. So the federal makes guidelines. So let's say for season dates, you can only have a 60-day duck season. There are then regulations of how you can schedule that 60 days. You can have it split. So you can have a couple weeks open, close, and then a couple weeks, but it has to stay 60 days of total hunting. But then you have states that have some ability. Like Illinois, we have more zones. So we have different zones, which allows them to basically have different season dates across the state to coincide with the migration, theoretically. But what that does is if you have too many zones, then you can't have a split season because of that federal guideline. And so the Flyweight Council basically comes up with these federal guidelines that then states have to implement and follow.
Okay.
So basically we're talking season dates, bag limits, that kind of stuff.
That's what you're changing.
Correct. You're not changing like the baiting law.
No.
That's not really ever brought up. I mean, it may now that it's getting more well-known and more talked about. But typically at those flyweight councils, they're looking at data, looking at harvest trends, and coming up with season dates and bag limits.
What about the identification law with the tier 1, tier 2 system?
That's very much a state thing.
Yeah. So that's something that we could implement eventually.
I have no idea.
It's only right now in Nebraska.
Correct.
They're trying it out. We got a couple of years to figure out if that's doing anything bad or good. All right.
Correct.
And
States
then
can choose to be more restrictive than the federal guidelines, but they can't go the other way.
The perfect way to describe it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Well said.
Yeah. And then that's a big thing right now. What is the common consensus right now of seeing the way that duck behavior is changing? And it's changing in Illinois too. It's not just changing for the South, but it's also changing in Illinois. Are they coming early? Are they coming late? Are we happy with the way it's set up right now? What do you think the future looks like?
It's such a hard answer because so much of it depends on where you hunt, and not just like where geographically you live, but what type of habitat. There was an open house, waterfowl open house for the last 5-year cycle, and I think 2019. So we're getting close to, there'll probably be a new one here coming out shortly. But at these open houses, they were looking at, should we push waterfowl season back? Because what they found was by the time a lot of ducks came down, season was already almost over. And it depended where you lived and where you hunted. Some people really liked that idea. Some people hated it because, okay, well, now all my water's going to be freaking froze up. So even if ducks are around, they're just going to fly right over me. And so it's such a nuanced, and there's so many different stakeholders that have different opinions. It's very hard to just kind of narrow it down to a simple answer for that. But
it's also good to remember that Illinois is a really long state.
Yeah.
Compared to other states. I mean, geographically, it's hard to manage that. I mean,
Yes.
It's almost 6-7 hours drive from north to south. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
You're gonna have 2 different kind of cycles within each year. So it's like, how do you account for maybe things freeze early one year?
Right.
Like, how do you take that into account too with things like that?
And I know they at the last open house, they did have some charts that illustrated, the average freeze date, average thaw date. And you can see that those are changing. But I don't know if they've changed enough to make it worth shifting a season forward or back or splitting a season again. That's not my role. That's somebody else's job to figure out. But it'll be interesting to see how these conversations progress in future years for sure.
We'll say, if I had a crystal ball and could do anything, I would do the split season. I would reduce down the number of zones so that we could have a split season, because I really like the split season. I think it showcases one of the most important aspects of efficient waterfowl hunting, and that's the importance of having refuge time. And when you have a split in your season, so you have a week or 2 or 3 where it's all of a sudden refuge, it gives you that second opening day. It gives you that second chance to have the birds all imprinted and all the available food out there, as opposed to when we're in the middle or later parts of the season, a high percentage of those birds know which fields are hunted and which ones aren't. And that's frustrating. So I love the split. if I had the crystal ball, that'd be the main thing I would go after.
On average, how far apart are the seasons? Like we have like a split firearm season. I mean, we have that. So, but like, how, like is it a week, a 2 week, or a month? Like, what's
it very much depends on the state. But like when I hunted Kentucky, again, this is a decade plus ago. It certainly could have changed. But the way they operated was they had a 1 week season that covered Thanksgiving, and what that allowed is obviously you're killing some resident birds, but duck hunting is very much a social activity. And so they realized, hey, we get a lot of duck hunters coming into Kentucky to hunt with their family, to hunt with their friends over this holiday. So they basically put their split. So you have a week that it opens over Thanksgiving, it closes for 2 weeks, and then the full rest of the season opens back up afterwards.
Okay.
But again, it can depend state to state.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Cool. Well, I appreciate you guys helping me, filling me.
It's a fascinating topic. Yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but yeah, it's intriguing. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. And I can see the conversation on both sides and see the pros and cons on basically each side.
Yeah, especially because down south, I mean, you've got so much of like the local economies built around.
Right.
So like if they're not coming, it's hard to just be like, well, try something. Like I get it, like you might have to try something new, but I can definitely see why people are not just from the the being able to go hunt side of things, but also like
the livelihood and economy. Absolutely.
Yeah, we don't want to be dismissive of how big a problem this is for them.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And what was that, Lauren? I'm sorry.
Oh, and just a big cultural change. People don't like those, so
no,
it's hard to adapt. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hunting, even though modern hunting's really only been around for 100 years, it's built into the generations of the 3 to 5 generations of family members that you might have had already in those 100 years that have. Yeah, I mean, those memories are there, and then you had those. That's part of you, and any change in that is scary and unfortunate, and it's.
And duck hunting is one of those things that definitely becomes more of a lifestyle than like an activity or a hobby. I don't know how many duck hunters I've met throughout my life, but I would wager a guess 98 to 99% of them, their house is decorated in duck stuff. Mm-hmm. It's very much a lifestyle thing. So I definitely, I mean, yeah, if there was a change here that took away, deer hunting or made deer hunting way less effective than it ever could, yeah, I would be a little perturbed too, and I'd be looking for someone to blame or looking for things to make adjustments to make things better, because it's very much it becomes your life.
It's very hard too because they're migratory. It's not like okay, we can just reintroduce like elk in this area. It's like, well, like what do? You know what I mean? If they're not moving, so
yeah, some problems just don't have a great solution.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. But I got to read this quote from our old pal Ding Darling in 1935. So this is a good little quote about waterfowl regulation, really any type of hunting regulations in general. But he said this back when he was the chief of the Bureau of Biological Survey. And so this was 80 years ago. The regulations adopted for the last shooting season were considered by many to be entirely satisfactory, while to others they were wholly unsatisfactory. It is obviously impossible to satisfy everyone, but it is equally obvious that in too many cases, opinion is based entirely upon prejudicial grounds or upon limited observations made in one small area. Our obligation as waterfowl hunters and as conservationists is to take the time to understand the background behind regulations and accurately communicate them when inclined to do so.
Well said. Love it.
Yes, and that's from Ducks Unlimited, posted a article kind of about all the different waterfowl baiting regulations. And so, yeah, we can put that link up there too. But it's called The Changes to the U.S. Migratory Bird Hunting Regulation Baiting Laws. Article by Ducks Unlimited by Mike Brasher and Dale Humberg, who coincidentally enough used to be the waterfowl biologist from Missouri. When I was a young kid, a high school kid, I used to call him because he was a waterfowl biologist, and I would ask him, how would I become a waterfowl biologist? So I'm sure he doesn't remember that, but I talked to him on the phone many times, way a million years ago.
That's cool.
Oh, that's awesome. Cool. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys diving into that topic. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, hope to see y'all at some of our upcoming turkey workshops. Again, we got a full workshop slate. And maybe you're not even interested in turkey hunting. We have a bunch of partner events coming up that you'll start to see kind of posted in our social media feeds or newsletters, stuff like that. We have quite a few trivia nights coming up, a couple other outreach activities that we're excited about. So definitely stay tuned to all of our social media and our website, and you'll see those events coming. But it's going to be a busy spring, and we look forward to seeing you all out there. Should be fun.
Sounds great, guys. All right. Well, thank you all for your time, and we'll see you all next time.
See you.